Today is June 9th, 2023, and we have a kind of a special show today. Not only are we going to talk about the news of the week, what went on in the world of the SEC, clamping down on the two biggest exchanges in the world, what that means for everyone, we're also going to have a special guest on in the next 3-4 minutes from the first ever Canadian Bitcoin conference. So I'm not sure how many people in my audience are Canadian, but I would guess probably around half. There is a big conference happening next week, the first of its kind in Toronto, and there's going to be a whole bunch of amazing speakers. And we have the organizer of this conference, Daniel. He's going to be hopping on a call with me in about 2-3 minutes. I've tried to kind of line it up with the beginning of the show. And he's going to take a couple questions from you guys. If you have any, if you're curious about this event, ask away. We'll try and get to some of those in about 15 minutes. And then we're going to dive into everything that happened this week with the SEC going after Binance, going after Coinbase, what it could potentially mean, potentially spell the end of crypto trading as we know it today in the United States and potentially in some places abroad. And then some interesting quickie news as well. Canada raising rates, the Fed mumbling about inflation bans, all sorts of fun stuff. So yeah, thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. Please make sure if you're watching to give the video a like. It helps it get out to more people. And without further ado, we'll jump into it. Now, I am a minute or two ahead of schedule, but what I'll do here, I got to check to see if Daniel's in our call. He's not yet. He's the organizer for the Canadian Bitcoin Conference, but I'll go over quickly what that is if you haven't heard of it. So you can go to CanadianBitcoinConf.com, and this is going to be happening in downtown Toronto on June 17th and 18th. It is a Bitcoin-only conference, so no shitcoins. And I'm actually going to be speaking there too, which is super fun. I don't think I've spoken at a conference before. I've been to a conference. I haven't spoken at one, at least on a stage. I've spoken at meetups. But yeah, this will be the first time I speak at a conference, so that'll be kind of interesting. Hopefully we'll be talking about all the stuff going on in the world of making videos about Bitcoin. But yeah, I won't spoil all the speakers. You can go to the website yourself, but Greg Foss is going to be there, BTC Sessions, Troy Cross, a lot of people that you probably know from the world of podcasts. I'm in there too somehow. And it's going to be a good romp. It's not just going to be about, talking about, where's the price of Bitcoin going, but really diving into the fundamentals of, privacy, how Bitcoin is used around the world, some really interesting topics and panels. So if you haven't checked it out, go check it out and see what it's all about. All right. Still waiting on Daniel. So I'll stall for time here a little bit. I didn't quite figure out how to do video calling on my live streams yet. So I'm just patching it in through Google Meet. Hopefully that works. I'm pretty sure it'll work. But if anybody here is in the world of AV or live streaming and knows a good way to just insert guests without using like a completely different program, still trying to do it within OBS, let me know. That would help. All right. Give me 1 second here. A little bit of a different show because I got this interesting setup, but yeah, 1 sec. See if we are good to go here. Check out the comments. So yeah, I asked you guys, have you ever been to a Bitcoin conference? And that'll be one of the questions that I asked Daniel too, is like, what makes a good conference? Because there are the ones in Miami, which are just full of so many people and so many panels going on simultaneously. It's kind of hard to keep track of things sometimes. And then there's these more intimate ones. And I'm not quite sure the scale of this one. I imagine it'll be more like a mid-sized conference, at least a few hundred people. But yeah, I think we got Daniel here. So we'll jump into the call. Hope it works.
So just looking at your question there. So what inspired me to organize the conference and set it up? I've been a Bitcoiner for probably since about 2013, 2014. Back in the day, listening to Max Kaiser on when he was on Kaiser Report in the UK. That's where it all started for me. I came from Ireland to Canada just right after the financial crash in 2008. We knew something was wrong with the financial system, myself and my wife. we were looking for something different, and we were looking for the reasons why people were losing their homes in Ireland. And there was we were kind of going into a bit of a depression at that point. So when we were in Canada, I was listening to Max Kaiser, like I said, going down the rabbit hole. He probably orange pilled me. We were, sending money back. There's same as a lot of other Canadians sending money back to Ireland. I had friends in Ireland. We were trying to getting frustrated with the banking system, and would send money back, and tried it through Bitcoin. So we downloaded the Bitcoin core, send the money back, thinking this is amazing, that we can do this outside of the system, the regular system. So that's kind of when it started. And then obviously with the price go up mania, we got carried away kind of 2016, 2017, 2018. Got a bit more into it, found more people that were into it, some family members, friends, that sort of thing. People were talking about it. And that was it. I was hooked at that point. Listened to a lot of different people. Listened to I don't know if Greg Foss was around at that point, but the Lawrence Lepard. I was kind of listening to a bit of the gold and silver side of it as well. Some of those, Danielle Camboni, who's coming to the conference, would have been one of those. And trying to learn as much as possible. We were going to meetups. We live in Oshawa. We were going to meetups in kind of Whitby. Plate Liquor, who probably from our area, had organized some meetups, so we were going to those. And my wife is an event planner by trade, so she organizes events for financial companies, insurance companies, that sort of thing. So we were talking to people at the meetups, having these conversations and thinking, why was there no conference in Canada? So I shouldn't say that. I know Dave Bradley has one, out west, but anything on the east side. So we approached Connor and we said, look, we're thinking about doing this. This is really cool that you're doing the meetups. Manuel has the experience. We have, we'd like to pull this together. So that was it. That's kind of where it started. And from there, then, the ball got rolling. And we were, Greg Foss was some of the meetups, Tomer. We reached out to others. Brad Mills, started to get kind of support from the Bitcoiners in kind of the GTA or Ontario anyway. And it went from there. So that's kind of how it all started. And like as soon as we started reaching out to people to get their feedback, get their ideas, and get speakers on the list, it just snowballed. I mean, there's lots of good Bitcoiners in the area, and lots of people wanted to get behind it, provide support, help in any way they could, volunteer, all those sorts of things. So that's where it all started, and that's how we got to where we are today.
Awesome. I guess my second question to you would be, what in your opinion makes for a good Bitcoin conference?
What makes a good Bitcoin conference? For me, in the conferences that I've attended, I have a very short attention span. So, some people, I know a lot of people kind of suffer from this. I think I've got ADHD. I haven't been diagnosed yet, but I'm pretty sure. But I kind of have a trade in professions and do things in short bursts. So, trying to keep things short and sweet and getting to the point is something I think makes for a good conference. Obviously, the people make a good conference as well. The one of the things that Bitcoiners and probably this from being around a long time, Bitcoiners make you feel welcome and give you a good vibe. There's always a good positive feeling about Bitcoiners. We certainly got that from the meetups in the community that Connor had started to develop in our area, in the in the Durham region of Toronto. So the people are always brilliant. So that's what I think makes a good conference. Trying to keep the panel short and sweet, good speakers. And that's kind of where, and no shit coiners or limit the shit coinery, I think is one of the things. So yeah, we that's kind of something we started to focus on or wanted to focus on for this conference. I with availability of people and guests, we reached out to a lot of good Bitcoiners. From we wanted to keep it mostly Canadian. Obviously based on the subject, but so we had reached out to a lot of Canadian Bitcoiners, some American Bitcoiners who had good expertise, and we had started to develop that and match make good topics, good people with together, so that we would get good content out of that as well. So those are the things we focused on, and then trying to relate it as much to the Canadian market, the Canadian Bitcoin market, and make sure it was good for Canadian Bitcoin as well. Those are the types of things we wanted to kind of focus on. And we think we're doing this out of the best intentions. So I think as long as you stay grounded in that, and make sure you're always going back to that to make sure it's for the best intentions of the community and for Bitcoin, then I think that's what'll make for a good conference, and people people resonate to that or understand that. Just on I know I didn't cover the last topic on the what we can expect from the speakers. So anybody who's had a chance to look through maybe the agenda, see the speakers we have on there, we're blown away by the support and the people that have come forward, the great speakers that have come to help and support this and make this a good conference. Some of my favorites, really, I'm an engineer by trade, so I'm in the energy sector. Putting together the nuclear, when they were looking at nuclear Bitcoin mining in the States, I was like, right, we got to do something on that. Like I with nuclear in Ontario, and then Nuclear Bitcoiner reached out, and we had started to brainstorm, and I was reaching out to a lot of people and just getting different ideas from people. So that there's a panel there for nuclear Bitcoin mining in Canada, and we had thrown in Ben Lobb, who's an MP for Bruce Huron area, and is the shadow cabinet for cryptocurrency governance there. He's on that panel along with Troy Cross, who's done some work down in the States for nuclear mining, and Aaron Foster from Luxor. So again, we tried to put together as good a panel, to get the most out of that and get that conversation going. Other things that'll be discussed, yourself on a panel. We want to give an opportunity for people to ask questions to speakers as well, which we think is a really good thing. There's topics. We have a kind of a bit of a macro one. Greg Foss is on a couple. Lawrence Lepard talking about kind of macro, what the other industries are doing, the gold and silver, the investment, what the banks are looking at. Like that's going to be discussed, and especially kind of relating to Canada. We have some, it's Toronto. A big topic in Toronto is real estate. So we have some. The Kratz brothers and Daniel Foch, they're real estate agents with good, they have podcasts and a good presence, but they're Bitcoiners as well, so they fit the bill, and they'll be able to give good insight into both sides of that conversation. What's if real estate's a good investment or a shitcoin or not. Other awesome things that were other panels that are on there as well. We have Tomer, who's a Torontonian. We wanted to lead with him. We have looking at policy, Ben Harper, Carol Campisi from ShakePay. Brad Mills and Magdalena, who's been appointed there down in El Salvador for governance of there as well. So great policy panel. We wanted to cover some things in the Lightning Network and some of the stuff that the great Canadian companies and people who are in Canada are doing work on. So we have Kevin Rourke and Jared Nusinoff as well talking about that. So good. Really, what we wanted to focus on was a good variety of topics. And giving people plenty of options so that we weren't just kind of going down a rabbit hole of one or two topics. So that's what we wanted to focus on, and that's what people can expect from coming to the conference.
Awesome. So let's wrap it up. We got one question here from the audience from Makiko. Will people be able to live stream or see the speaker presentations or slides after the conference?
So to be able to either live stream the speaker presentations or be available. So because this is the first year of the conference, we wanted to. There's a lot going on for getting it set up for the first year. So having live streaming or making it available. Well, there'll be parts of the discussions that will be available afterwards. But we wanted to be fair to the people who are coming to the conference and focus on that first and make sure that experience for them, as good as it possibly can be. I think in the future, next year we'll look into that. But certainly for the people, that are coming in for the conference, the Canadians that are coming in, we didn't want to take away from any of that. And we wanted to get as many people together as possible. Because, like I said, going to the meetups and going to different conferences, the vibe is really cool around Bitcoiners and Canadian Bitcoiners. So we wanted to kind of lean into that and get as much out of that as possible. And we thought maybe live streaming might take away a little bit of that. So there has been some, a lot of, requests from people in the States and other parts of Canada who can't make it, who wanted to live stream, and we'll look into that next year. But yeah, we'll be releasing some of the content after the conference, and yourself will be there. There's other media personalities and people who will be there interviewing, providing and recording some of those discussions as well. So I think there'll be plenty of opportunities to see some of the panels afterwards.
Sweet. All right, that's everything.
Perfect. So much. Thank you very much for having me on. Thanks for your support with the conference, and I'll see you next week.
Cool. Sounds good. All right. Thanks a bunch.
Okay. Have a good night.
Cool. All right. Hope that worked. My AV skills need some work. I need to get a switchboard operator, I guess. But yeah, really interesting setup. Go check it out if you haven't already. CanadianBitcoinConf.com. Get your tickets. They are almost sold out. And yeah, hope to see everyone there. There's something special about meeting Bitcoiners in, I guess, real life. Compared to just having your conversations on Twitter or YouTube or just kind of passively ingesting all this Bitcoin knowledge. You're really able to, connect with some people who are extremely knowledgeable in this space. And Bitcoin's always one of those things that takes a very long time to wrap your head around, and everyone always has like a little doubt or 20 doubts about how it could ever become a global currency. And being able to kind of like test those ideas or doubts in person and have a dialogue with someone really, to me, has helped advance my Bitcoin education. So yeah, highly implore you guys to come to something like this. There's going to be another one called the Bitcoin Rodeo, and I'll probably have Dave Bradley to speak about that one at some point as well. And that'll be in Calgary about a month from this one. So yeah. All right, let's dive into the news. So, the big thing this year is that, or the big thing this week is that big old Gary Gensler is finally putting the hammer down after years of letting the crypto space run wild. Within just 2 days, they have come out and they have sued both Binance and Changpeng Zhao, the CEO, at large. So let's dive into this. What is the basis of their case here? What can they get with Binance? Because as you might know, if you've ever used Binance, it's more of an international exchange. Coinbase is proudly an American first place. Binance, nobody could even tell you where the headquarters are. They kind of operate everywhere. And initially, they weren't available at all to US customers. And they launched their own faction called Binance US, which entered America, tried to do everything regulated by the books. Clearly, according to the regulators, have not done that well. And so now the SEC and specifically Gary Gensler are really going after Binance. There was a little bit of a drop in Bitcoin this week, but actually surprisingly, Bitcoin has borne the brunt of the damage here. The real damage is to basically everything else in this space. So why does it matter? It is a culmination of a long-running investigation into Binance by US regulators. The case claims that Binance sold unregistered crypto asset securities and that its own tokens, the BNB token and the BUSD token, as well as the staking schemes, are in fact securities. And so if you launch a security in the United States, you have to get regulated. If you are a publicly traded piece of whatever, you fall under a commodity basket or you fall under a security basket. And if there is an intention from the creators or the founders of whatever the security is, if there's a party that benefits from the profits of some organization connected to this, then it is a security. So I won't go over the Howey test, but I think everyone kind of knows. If it's not Bitcoin, it's a security. There are those in the crypto industry that vehemently defend the right for cryptocurrencies to not be deemed as securities, and there's many lawsuits ongoing, but essentially, if there's someone you can sue that is connected to it, it's probably a security. So Binance sought to kind of evade these laws by making Binance US sort of separate from Binance, being a little bit pickier and choosier as to what they listed on there, but regardless, they have been kind of intermingled with the Binance International Corporation the whole time. And then the further bigger complaint is that Binance was running its own market-making schemes that commingled user funds and funds between the Binance US exchange and the Binance International change, which is kind of a no-no. So yeah, they've really gone after this exchange. And more specifically, they're finally coming out, the SEC is finally coming out and saying, hey, these cryptocurrencies are securities. And some of them are Solana, Polygon, Matic, Cardano. I mean, the big ones. Like if you look at the top 15, 20 crypto list, anything that is not explicitly a stable coin, Bitcoin and Ethereum is essentially being deemed as a security. Maybe not Dogecoin, but that could be soon too. But yeah, what does that really mean? What does that entail? And what has Binance kind of responded with as part of the decision here? So they've come and they've kind of spoke explicitly against this. They said that there's no basis for this fraud. They're not commingling funds. Every user fund is safe. But within a couple days, and actually as of this morning, Binance US is now halting dollar deposits. So you cannot deposit US dollars from a bank into Binance US. And they put out kind of this tricky letter here, this tweet I'll kind of open up, saying essentially user assets remain safe. Let me double check this. But as of June 13th, they are prepared to pause all withdrawal channels. So if you are a person who uses Binance US, and I would say Binance at all, I know in Canada they said they're pulling out, kind of slower, but just take all your funds off of it. There's no upside to keeping it on there anymore. They're not going to maybe rug pull you, but these things could be held up in bankruptcy courts. The SEC is now trying to freeze the assets of Binance, including the users' assets, right? So your funds could be essentially stuck in litigation. They might not disappear, but we know how these things go. It takes years to disperse things. Fun news this week, actually, if you were part of the Quadriga CX situation, you should have received a check this week for 13% of whatever the value of your holdings were as of April 2019. So yeah, and that was 5 years ago, and that I would say went faster. There are some people who are still waiting for bankrupt exchanges to send their money back. So the death of the centralized exchange is slowly coming upon us, but some of the interesting things that are kind of a part of this story worth covering is that Binance lawyers have actually alleged now that SEC Chair Gensler was offering to serve as an advisor to Binance back in 2019. So Gary Gensler knows Changpeng Zhao, has had meetings with him before, knew whatever was going on with this exchange was unregistered securities, but still enabled it anyways. And something kind of important to know about the SEC chair, Gary Gensler, is that he actually, I would say, understands cryptocurrencies quite well compared to most bureaucrats in the system in the US. He taught a course at MIT about Bitcoin and blockchain. If you want to really, really dig into it, you can actually find evidence that he was part of MIT's Media Lab, which launched an ICO that ended up being a rug pull, and he was an advisor on that board. So, we're going to see in the long term if he's actually able to defend himself in some of these cases, or if he has to kind of recuse himself for being involved with some of these things. But he hasn't come out and really refuted the Binance lawyers' claims, but he was offered, he offered to be an advisor to Binance as soon as back in 2019, and now he's trying to regulate them to death. Which is kind of interesting. Binance, in response, not only did they put out this letter about them pausing fiat withdrawals and deposits, but they are also coming out and starting to slowly delist pairs as well. Robinhood, which I guess I would call them like a pretty good sized broker of cryptocurrencies in the US. They are delisting Matic, Solana, Polygon. And again, just simple advice for people. I think they're shitcoins. You may not. But we can come to the consensus that these things are not going to be liquid and allowed in the US. And, whether you think these companies have the right to defend themselves and define what assets they really are, all of these things had pre-sales to insiders that kind of founded the project. And there are entrepreneurs and there are legal groups and there are foundations that are all connected to these things. They are not fully decentralized organizations. And I don't think decentralization has that much of a spectrum on it, to be honest. I think that if you have a CEO, a founder, or someone you can sue, you don't get to call yourself decentralized. And it begs the question, if you're a security, but your token doesn't actually represent equity or ownership like a stock does, then what really is the point? The buyers of these things get no benefits. And that is why I don't shitcoin anymore. So we're going to talk about Coinbase next, but before we do that, we're going to jump into some quickie stories from the week, some fun ones. And then just before that, we'll have a quick sponsor break. And stay tuned. This week's show is brought to you by Beaver Bitcoin. Dollar cost averaging is the most stress-free method to enter the Bitcoin space. And if you're looking for a simplified way of buying Bitcoin in Canada without needing to rely on a custodial exchange, Beaver Bitcoin is your best bet. Beaver Bitcoin lets you set up recurring Bitcoin purchases directly from your Canadian bank account and straight into a Bitcoin address that you control. It's like a savings account in a currency that you actually want, or a Netflix subscription that doesn't suck. And if you don't want to wait to stack sats, Beaver Bitcoin supports instant non-custodial Bitcoin buying via e-transfer as well. Give it a shot today at beaverbitcoin.com. All right, quick jump into the chat here. Makiko is saying, someone had another question about Lightning payments. I'm sorry, I know sometimes when people interact in the chat, their messages don't pop up on my end. If you have any other questions about the conference that didn't get answered, please just comment them in the video below or message me on Twitter or something, and I will try and get you an answer if I can. And if you're just watching the show after it's live, if you have any other questions, send them to me. Makiko says, at least Binance is being transparent about that, the pausing withdrawals. Seems most exchanges that go down give you less than 24 hours to pull out your funds, and even then it's just luck. I agree. FTX went down extraordinarily quick. And Binance, they're pulling out of Canada. Same with crypto.com. We don't know the legitimacy of these things, but you won't see banks saying, yeah, pull your funds, we're going to get taken down soon, right? You're kind of just alerted, and then the FDIC kicks in. But yeah, for these exchanges, Binance especially is essentially telling their users, not your keys, not your coins. Your funds are safe, but, pull them off if you need to make the necessary arrangements. I'm glad they're saying that. I don't think Binance is ethically pure by any means, but it's good that they are telling their users to get moving. All right, and yeah, never seen deposits get frozen before withdrawals too. So it's good. When FTX was about to go down, it was business as usual there. And even when they officially were bankrupt, they still let you send money to it. So, by taking the proactive step of preventing users from putting new funds in because you're worried about regulation, it's better than nothing, right? All right, quickie news for this week. Got some interesting ones. So the Bank of Canada, Usually Canada's always a step behind the US when it comes to rate policy, monetary policy, but they paused officially on rate hiking way before the Fed did. The Fed technically hasn't paused on rate hiking, they've just slowed it down. They might pause this month, but they've been paused for a few months. They just decided to hike the interest rates another 25 basis points in Canada. And so this is kind of an interesting chart. The blue line is the interest rate, the red line is inflation. Interest rates now are higher percentage-wise year over year than the inflation rate that they tell you, which is kind of interesting. Usually every time that has happened, because we know that monetary policy kind of lags behind inflation, it does lead to a recession. There's very few times where you will see a big uptick in inflation and then a big uptick in rates kind of, superseding inflation and not see a recession. The question that we always ask is, how big and how deep is it going to be? I have a thing here I'll pull up, which was really interesting. And it was sort of about, I know that we talked about this very briefly last show, but it was about kind of the demographics and the big influx of immigration into Canada. This is a chart of non-permanent resident admissions into Canada. And so the other lines are representing older years going back to 2015. So the lower the line, the older the year. And you can see that like admissions for non-permanent residents have, pretty steadily grown year over year over year in terms of their numbers. So 2015, it was like, a little over 400,000. Last year, 1.3 million Canadians came in. Look at the trajectory for 2023 so far. It's way outpacing last year, and last year was a record-breaking year for admissions of non-permanent residents. So we kind of have an interesting thing going on here where we don't have full immigration targeting in Canada. We have this slowing birth rate, but we are letting in a lot of immigrants. And so that does stimulate the economy to some degree, but it also is a bit of a blunt force thing because you're letting all these people come into Canada and some of them are going to get jobs and we have a pretty tight labor market. And should we expect a recession, which could be coming with the rates going up and all the refinancing and all that, you're going to have a lot of people here who are without jobs, who are competing over jobs. And could be interesting. But I think whatever recession we have is going to be very, very different from what the US has. Their housing market has not bounced back quite as quick as ours has up here. Their immigration targeting, although Americans love to talk about immigration all the time, is not nearly as, big in terms of a percentage leap as Canadian immigration. So that'll be an interesting thing to watch moving forward. The next story, BitGo. BitGo is a custodian. So a custodian in the crypto space is somebody who holds on to your Bitcoin, your Ethereum, whatever on your behalf, so that you don't have to take responsibility and hold it. You might think, well, that kind of destroys the point of Bitcoin and crypto, but it's usually for big corporations who hold on behalf of millions of users. And the security involved in creating your own custody apparatus when you represent, tons of clients, maybe on an exchange, is tough. So you outsource that to someone else. BitGo bailed out another custodian called Prime Trust this week, which is a pretty big deal because Prime Trust used to be, I believe, the biggest custodian in the space, and they have shrunk dramatically. So it's been kind of looked at as a bit of a bailout that business was failing, and BitGo kind of just purchased them in its entirety, absorbed all of their clients there. This one's like a Clown World post. This is in Turkey, which is going under massive inflation. President Erdogan just appointed the former co-CEO of First Republic Bank. Yes, the bank that went under with $500 billion of assets or $300 billion of assets. The co-CEO of that failed bank was just appointed to be the new central bank governor of Turkey. And obviously, the Turkish lira has tanked as a response to that. You could not pick a worse person to do that. I think next time I decide to start a medicine company, I'll follow Turkey's lead here and pick Elizabeth Holmes for that. Another little bit of Federal Reserve gaslighting here. So you might know that the Federal Reserve, they come out and they always say, hey, we're aiming for 2% inflation. That's going to be our goal. That's our mandate, unemployment, whatever, right? They have these goals. That's how they decide whether they raise or lower rates. They want to get to these goals. The goal has always been 2% inflation. We got to get 2% inflation. That's the sweet spot. And now, with inflation running pretty rampant and it looking a little stickier than normal, they're saying we're going to shift inflation targets to a band. of 1.5% to 2.5%. So again, this slow tacit admission, this slowly giving into higher inflation, in my opinion, leads to the collapse of fiat. You can only give and give and give so much, but people cannot handle inflation rates at 8%. Everyone's going mad. It's the topic of the day. It's the biggest part of the election cycle. And at 8% inflation, you lose half your wealth in 6-7 years compounded or something like that, maybe a little bit less. 2.5 doesn't seem that pernicious, but it is going from 2% to 2.5%, you lose 50% of your purchasing power at quite a substantial rate faster than 2%. So it's a big deal when they start saying things like this or mumbling and considering it. So yeah, not great. And then the last little quickie story here. We've got some scientists in the crowd, maybe, or people who understand science better than I do. Explain this. A zookeeper discovered the first ever virgin birth as a crocodile makes itself pregnant. So a croc created a fetus that was 99.9% genetically identical to herself in a zoo in Costa Rica. These births are apparently commonly seen in sharks, birds, snakes, and lizards. So color me confused. I didn't know that you could impregnate yourself, but yeah, first ever crocodile impregnation as well. Unfortunately, it was a stillborn and did not hatch, but it begs the question, where's the sperm coming from? It's called parthenogenesis when these virgin births happen. But hey, you never know. We're doing all sorts of, genetic engineering ourselves here, swapping out people's bits when they're kids, all that controversial stuff. Maybe we'll find a way to impregnate ourselves, and then we won't have to worry about population collapse, because it seems that nobody can stay together as a couple these days anyways. So maybe the best thing for the human race is just to figure out how we can impregnate ourselves, and then we can just keep it going perpetually. All right, enough of that nonsense. All right, I am here with a spicy rant with a bit of data points, but I want to talk about Coinbase. So Coinbase was also one of the big subjects of this week's SEC crackdown. The SEC sent a notice to Coinbase saying, you guys are also listing a bunch of unregistered securities. While we don't want to call it outright fraud, you have been running an illegal marketplace for 2019. And it's important to note that the SEC approved Coinbase going public back in 2021, but they said, us allowing this to go public has nothing to do with, how we see the legitimacy of the exchange. We're just saying from a financial perspective, they pass all the requirements to go public. And now, once they've gone public, they are now being sued with Binance in the same week for similar crimes against security laws. So SEC charges Coinbase just one day after levying charges against the world's largest exchange. They filed a suit against Coinbase on Tuesday, alleging the popular U.S. trading platform has been operating as an unregistered broker since at least 2019. So the complaint filed in the U.S. District Court alleges Coinbase made billions of dollars unlawfully, acting as an unregistered broker by providing a marketplace for securities and affecting transactions for Coinbase. So Coinbase stock slid quite a bit. Their chief legal officer said that the allegations on Tuesday morning that the SEC reliance on an enforcement-only approach in the absence of clear rules for the crypto industry is hurting America's economic competitiveness, and companies like Coinbase have demonstrated a commitment to compliance. That being said, Brian Armstrong, let me just see where this is. Oops, I have some other threads here. Brian Armstrong, who's the CEO of Coinbase, said, you come to us and, we'll figure something out here, but we're not shutting down business. We don't really, we're not just going to roll over. We're going to take this to court and figure out what the deal is. There has to be a framework for Bitcoin. All right. So what is my take on all of this stuff? I guess I'll get to not spewing off the news nonstop. What is my take on all this stuff? My take is that I'm a little bit on two sides of this. I agree with the SEC that so many of these things are unregistered securities and that there is a protocol for becoming an exchange of anything in the US, whether it's stocks or whether it's art, whether it's anything. There is a protocol and regulations and rules you have to follow, right? As much as some of us might not like those rules, as much as we might see them as overbearing or anti-innovation, there are clear rules. And so Coinbase is alleging, well, no, it doesn't say cryptocurrency in particular. Cryptocurrency is not under the basket of all the other things that you call securities, and they cite saying, well, Bitcoin, it's decentralized. It's not a security. And, the CFTC says it's a commodity, and we think maybe it's neither, right? a lot of what Coinbase is going on essentially is a break things first and apologize later for it methodology. And to their credit, I will say that I don't think all cryptocurrencies that are not Bitcoin fall under security regulations. I think there are things like NFTs, which can be sold similar to securities in some light, but are technically tokens issued on a blockchain that may not have a central issuer, that those you can't just call securities or stocks. Those are also art. So they're right in the sense that there isn't really a full framework for cryptocurrency in the United States. But nevertheless, you have to kind of define what to do about these things on other levels. And the SEC is not the place that makes the rules. They just do the enforcement. So the Congress has to pass laws and figure out, how do we enforce these things? And they're getting on it pretty quickly up here in Canada. They've made pretty clear rules up here in Canada and in the UK. The US can't seem to kind of get it together. But the reason that I think that you can't just say, oh, everything is a security is that these crypto exchanges need to have regulation. You can't just say security, not security. If it's not a security, you're good to go. There have to be rules on top of that. And what I mean by that is that, in the stock trading world, you can't, use user data to front run trades, in broad daylight, let's just say. There has to be some sort of agreement, then you have to let users know things. But when you set up a crypto exchange, you can front run users all you want, right? There aren't a ton of rules around that, or at least if there are, they don't really follow them because all these rules are written for blatant security exchanges, not for commodity brokers like, a CFTC or a futures organization. So, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, I'm kind of on the end that I think most of these things like Cardano, Solana, all these shit coins, I think a lot of them are securities. They have a foundation, but they also don't really entitle anyone to the profits of the organization. You are relying on the organization to, do a successful product, but they aren't equity in any way. And so if they aren't equity, it begs the question, like if they're not equity, if they're not bonds, what type of security are there? And it would be nice if there was some clarification on that. But that doesn't give a pass to Coinbase. So what I like to do is dig a little bit into the SEC's perspective on this, because there are some obviously big shit coins like Solana, Cardano, all these things which, they claim the banner of decentralization, but, they go down frequently. They need this organization that has, insider trading and pre-sales to fund their operations. That falls very much flatly under a security. And so what Coinbase says to all these is that, well, we do rigorous analysis. We make sure that these things pass the Howey test. Like our internal analysis says these things aren't securities. And everything that we've listed on our platform on Coinbase, we don't deem a security. And we think that would hold up in a court. And they also say, we pick, the best assets, the premier assets, things from, vetted teams, verifying the quality of all these things. And that's just simply not true. And I'm going to show you some examples of the type of absolute garbage that is listed on Coinbase. And garbage in terms of these things are clearly not decentralized. Garbage in terms of the supply of whatever token is completely unauditable, stuff like that. So going through the list of absolute garbage on Coinbase, we have this chart here belonging to a coin called Cryptex Finance. So classic shitcoin chart, big spike, bleed to nothing. The only reason these things don't go to zero is because essentially there's no more sellers left. Crypto people, among other people, they just like to hold things to zero. And unlike equities, which can get wiped out if a company goes bankrupt, cryptocurrencies don't really go bankrupt. They just have the founders sort of leave and the market making dries up. So Cryptex Finance, the reason that I say that these things have a hard time going to zero is there's a thing when you trade in markets called market depth, and you can kind of see, well, if I buy, X dollars worth of coin, how much am I going to impact the price? And normally when you're trading, normal stocks like Nvidia or Apple or whatever, those are really big stocks, but you can buy $1 billion worth on like one click, or maybe, $10 million worth, and you won't actually impact the price that much because the depth of the liquidity is so high, right? Cryptocurrencies have a record for not really being that liquid, but this is a ridiculous one. So this Cryptex Finance thing, it's got a fully diluted market cap of $12 million. So it would be considered like a small cap company in a Canadian exchange, right? It takes $230 to move the price of this 2%. That is how thin the market depth is. And this is officially, by Coinbase's standards, something that they would consider listing, and they did list it, right? So this passes their test of quality for an asset class, something that has, 10 million max supply, Cryptex Finance. I don't even know what this is. I don't think anybody has ever heard of Cryptex Finance. $230, you get to move the price 2%, right? And then let's dive into some that are the obvious kind of like, we're decentralized network, not a security thing. Something like Brain Trust here, big Brain Trust, if you bought this thing when it launched, $32, now worth 65 cents. And again, it just follows that route of just like bleed to nothing. It won't go to zero because there's just some people that will never sell. But eventually the order book dries up and nobody can sell, sort of like NFTs, I guess, in that regard. So what is Brain Trust? I took a look into what exactly Brain Trust is. Brain Trust is a decentralized talent network. So think of like Upwork, or think of something for maybe freelancers or just talent in general. Maybe you're just looking to find, freelancers or companies that need to connect to one another with talent, right? First of all, nobody's heard of this. Look at these great Getty images, stock images of all these people working, very high quality, whoever designed their website, great job. All right, so this doesn't look like something that would be a cryptocurrency. This just looks like a normal startup website. But oh, hold up. Earn up to 100K in BTRST every time you refer a company to Brain Trust. And it starts to click. Oh, this might be a crypto thing. Doesn't look like a crypto thing, but now it's a crypto thing. Oh, it's worked with all these big companies. Wow, name dropping. That's a big one for the crypto space. Let's go into about. Let's see what the mission is for this company. So we believe that great talent is an asset, not an expense. We believe that talent deserves better. And that's why we're building the world's first and largest user-owned professional network and job marketplace. So we're going to let the users own our company by issuing a BTRST token that doesn't actually give you equity in the company. And we provide transparency and opportunities for learning and growth. Like, what does our token do? Well, read our shitty white paper. Oh, hold on. Wait a second here. There's a co-founder. There's another co-founder. There's a chief of staff. There's a VP of sales and expansion. There's a general manager. They have a team and culture. You can join them. This is not a cryptocurrency. This is not a decentralized network. This is 100% a security. And it's a security that doesn't give you any of the upside of actually owning a company. At least when I go and I buy shitty penny stocks on the, the pink sheets, I can feel like I own something. I can get diluted to high heaven, but I do technically own a little bit of the company. Stuff like this, vaporware. No one cares. No one uses this platform. Yet Coinbase says, welcome to our website. Welcome to the Coinbase exchange. We'll list your token. And after doing some rigorous analysis at Coinbase, we believe that this is not a security, and therefore we're going to list you. Circulating supply, 57%, and then the rest is obviously in the coffers of the founders. So a bunch of BS. And then there's other ones like Media Network. This is effectively dead as well. $180 the day it launches. Now it's worth 8.4. Well, that's impressive. But I don't know, self-reported circulating supply, 250,000 total supply. Nobody knows. Market cap, 2 million. I don't know how they figure out the market cap if they don't actually know the supply. I guess it's just on this self-reported cap. This is also listed on Coinbase. All of these really sketchy, shitty things listed on Coinbase. So yeah, this whole idea of that, their legal team does analysis on all their listings, it's bullshit. Don't believe it for 1 second. And I know that most of my audience sympathizes with me and they kind of get that all these things are shit coins, but there's a lot of people out there who are saying, well, we need to have, more thoughtful regulation in this space, and maybe Coinbase is not evil for doing this, and blah, blah, blah. This company should go to zero. I think that they have listed hundreds of these coins. And I said this when I did my kind of like yearly analysis back in 2023. I said 80% of everything is going to be wiped off of Coinbase. Might even be a little bit more now. But, the SEC, if they wanted to, they can fine for the volume and the money lost by users on every single one of these so-called not securities that they've listed. I think the fines are insurmountable, especially for a company with declining revenue, with a business model that is a race to the bottom. And yeah, I don't know anybody who would invest in Coinbase. I know I made a video when they IPO'd and I said, you know, this thing was like overvalued. I wasn't too interested in it. But the lengths of which they have gone to self-sabotage themselves in the name of trying to make a statement, the millions of dollars they've actually spent to lobby the government in the United States to convince them that, you know, what they have is not a securities platform, it's all in vain. It was all pointless. It's all stupid. And they've done all this on the back of just not clearly doing any due diligence or intentionally listing these things for God knows what reason. I think it's because that was a big revenue source for them for a while. You know, you can come with your crappy startup, pay $500,000, you get to be part of Coinbase, you get a Coinbase pump, the insiders trade the Coinbase pump, of course, like they always do. This thing is a mess. I think Brian Armstrong should step down. I think there is some salvageable components of the Coinbase platform, but they sold themselves out in about 2019, which is what the SEC complaint kind of says they did. They used to only have Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, and you can argue that Ethereum is a security, but let's just say it's not for now because some people say it's not. But all of a sudden they decided, no, we got to list everything on our platform. And we say that they go through vigorous standards, but it's not like that at all. It's whoever can pay the fee and whoever maybe has like a somewhat clean website. You know, if you made your thing in Squarespace, you might have a hard time getting onto Coinbase. But if you paid a web developer in a foreign country, you know, maybe $100,000 for a somewhat decent without took some founder headshots, it seems like you can get under the radar for the people who vet the quality at Coinbase. So yeah, there's my rant. Without further ado, let's dive into the comment section here. Thanks for taking me, God. Thanks for taking me. Happened in Jurassic Park. Nature always finds a way. Here, I'll try and pull the chat up here. So let's see. How many of you guys went on to a conference before? Yeah, Jurassic Park. Nature always finds a way of having new babies with itself. I think we'll figure it out as human beings, you know? Maybe the birth rate crisis will change our evolutionary biology. My man, hope you're good. AI talks back, art of the conversation. Thanks for checking in. Beyond any regulation, there are ethics. Most of the people buying altcoins don't know better. Most of them think altcoins are like Bitcoin, but cheaper. I agree. There's a ton of unit bias. The tiny shred of stuff that I will give Coinbase is like they've tried to invest in education. They've built courses, but guess what? All their courses are for, wait for it, shitcoins. No courses on Bitcoin. No understanding why this movement got started in the first place. Let's invest in, Kusama Network or Doji Poopy Coin. It's like, and people mock the names of these altcoins, but like they're that dumb most of the time. So yeah, there's a complete lack of ethics in Coinbase. It was a ton of greed, and it's a total lack of long-term thinking. This doesn't align at all with Bitcoiners. Bitcoiners are here for like a long-term movement, and Coinbase knew that it would eventually get stopped for this and that it would take it up in the courts. But the timing is bad for them because their revenue is dropping like a rock. The SEC has the financing of the government. We're still waiting on what happens with Ripple. That's like the kind of the landmark case here. But they're not going to get out of this, I don't think, in a good financial situation. And, it's not good to short things to zero. You can always get short squozen or squeezed or whatever you want to say. But I think this company is worth a lot less. They don't really have much here. Strike is eating their lunch with fees. Everything is eating their lunch. And if platforms are basically only able to host Bitcoin, there are going to be much cleaner experiences to get involved in Bitcoin than Coinbase, which has high fees and not even that great of a UX. So, yeah. Alrighty. That's my rant for the day. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the show. Sorry for the AV issues. Really appreciate everyone tuning in and listening. If you haven't already, like the video, gets it out to more people. And I will not be here next Friday. I will be at the conference. But on Tuesday, I have my big trucker video coming out. You know what? Let's play the first minute. Yeah, some of my chats aren't in here. Let's play the first minute of my trucker doc. So heard the conference partnered with IBEX for Lightning payments. More info on that from Dan would be interesting. Yeah, I think I saw that they are going to be able to sell like merch and some other stuff, maybe food, drinks, whatever at the conference, and it'll be in Lightning. IBEX has done the other Bitcoin conferences, and it works pretty seamlessly with Lightning, so it's great. All right, stay tuned. I'm going to show you guys an exclusive 1-minute preview from my little trucker dock thing here. It's kind of hard for me to like pull up Adobe Premiere, but maybe you can see that here if I make this full screen. Whoop. Okay, is this gonna work? All right. Here's the first minute, and full video will be out on Tuesday.
Small fringe minority.
It was the story seen around the world and heard around the world. In a matter of days, the trucker convoy became the most internationally recognized event in Canadian history over the last 50 years.
I couldn't focus at all.
And yet, 1 year later, 40 to 65% of Canadians thought the truckers represented a small minority of rowdy, selfish, and bigoted individuals whose protest was ultimately ineffective. But between an uproar of headlines and controversies, one question went unanswered. Who exactly are these truckers? Why do millions of people choose a job as isolating, dangerous, and until recently, as thankless as truck driving? Is it really just about the money, or is there something else? To find out, I did what any rational person would do. I flew across the country, snuck inside of an 80,000-pound semi-truck, and took to the roads with a real Canadian trucker that I had never even met before. Oh yeah, and that trucker just so happened to be one of the most controversial and pivotal organizers of the entire convoy.
Mr. Benjamin Dichter.
Mr. Dichter, thank you for being here.
Mr. Dichter, thanks so much for coming on tonight.
What I discovered on my journey left me absolutely stunned, and what you're about to see and hear may just change the way you think about trucking and the convoy forever. My name is Julian Figueroa,
And this is what I learned spending 48 hours as a Canadian trucker.
All right, that's it. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Hope you have a fantastic weekend, and I will see you Tuesday with the premiere of the rest of that video. It's going to be a good one. Take care, everyone, and have a good one.